Hello, everybody, and welcome to Optional Rule. My name is Scott. I'm the host of this weekly D&D discussion show. I talk about all things related to running games, D&D design, playing tabletop games in general, and I really enjoy it. So I hope you'll join in the conversation today, as you do every week. If you're here, go ahead and drop a hello in chat. I'd love to say hello back to you. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and drop them down in the chat below. I'd love to talk about, I'm way out of focus. What's going on there? Autofocus. I'm doing things they don't recommend you do when you stream. I'm using autofocus. Oh, come on, buddy. Anyway, it'll get my focus, I'm sure. Sorry about the focus. No one really needs to see my my face. So anyway, I am here to talk about D&D today in a blurry manner, apparently. I hope you'll join in the conversation, and I hope this is fun. This is supposed to be a fun weekly discussion show about D&D, things that work for me, things I might recommend you try. But D&D is a big thing. Not one thing works for everybody. You can try out different techniques. I'm going to be talking about fronts today. It's really bugging the heck out of me, that camera. I'm talking about fronts today, and let me just close my window and see if it comes back. And I'm going to talk a little bit about campaign planning. No, it doesn't. Talk a little bit about campaign planning and how to use the fronts system in your weekly D&D game prep. Now, where I am at in my current campaign, I'm looking for that. See if I can focus this automatically. Where I'm at in my D&D campaign is I have a standard Rime of the Frostmaiden campaign that I run weekly. We're at what's called a chapter transition right now. Well, my cat is trying to say hello to everybody. We're at a chapter transition now between the central activity in the 10 towns and I can't find a focus. That's all right. You're going to have to deal with it. Sorry, folks. Live shows and all that stuff. That's how they go. I'm at the transition in between chapter 1 and chapter 2 in my Rime of the Frostmaiden game. The campaign has gone pretty well so far. If you joined me on last week's stream, there's a couple of things that I'm going to talk about that I revealed last session that I'll talk about the outcome of and how we wrapped up the campaign and going on to really chapter 3 in Icewind Dale in my campaign version of it. And this is, when I say chapter, this is kind of how I'm aggregating it. It does not map. There are chapters in the book. Actually, I might map to it. I'm actually on chapter 2 in the Icewind Dale campaign, but it's chapter 3 in my setting because I had two kind of subplots that resolved in the book chapter 1 to try to bound it and move the players forward. And that was levels 1 and 2 were sort of one chapter. So that transition to 2 and 3 was the end of the chapter. And levels 3 was the second chapter. So that they're now level 4 and they're going on to sort of these greater regional area-wide adventures. And that's what this chapter 2 thing is. So that's been, it's been fun. It's interesting I tried a couple of techniques that I'd love to talk about today. Let me see. Mew V. Hello. Heyo there. Welcome to the channel. Sorry about the lack of focus on the camera. I actually don't know how to fix that. So I am going to apologize to everybody today if I'm a little blurry. And I wish I could switch to full screen on my browser if it's going to be like that. But anyway, I don't know how to quite fix it just yet. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a system called fronts. Now, fronts actually I should probably, hello, Necrophadian. Hello, welcome. I'm going to do RPG fronts. I'll even call it Dungeon World. So Dungeon World is where I know this system from, but I believe it predates Dungeon World itself. There's a system called fronts. I'll let you look it up, but if you Google for Dungeon World fronts, it'll give you how to create campaign fronts. So just basically creating 2 or 3 dangers on a chapter-wide scale. The two ways that I prepare for my campaign are typically, well, first of all, I have the source work. So in this case, I'm using Rime of the Frostmaiden. So there's that module. So and I have heavily remixed it, but at the end of the day, it's still the module, right? I'm still the pacing of it and the Although I mix and change it up a little bit, it's still the module. The overall themes of it are still the module because I like that the most, and a few other things like that. So it's still, even though I've done a lot, some things I've almost entirely rewritten, some adventures, at the core, it's still getting towards what that module was trying to do. I just did it in what I thought was more interesting ways. So there's that, but also then there's this idea of fronts and lazy DM prep. So you've seen me use lazy DM prep probably quite a bit in this stream if you showed up before. That's by a creator called Sly Flourish is their nickname, but somebody's replying to me on Twitter. Sly Flourish is their nickname, but Mike Shea is their name. You might see them out there. The Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, Fantastic Layers. Great creator. Great material anyway, but understand if you tag them online, they're a little irascible, so be aware of that. But that's a technique that's very good session to session because it's focused on what do I need to do at the next session. But you still need something to tie sessions together. You need you need some sort of Mew Mew V is saying I'm not blurry anymore. Thank you. What is lazy DM prep? Actually, let me go ahead and get into that, and then I'll get into fronts before I do it. So I think of this as zooming. Zooming is a business technique where you start with a high level problem. I want to solve world hunger. And then you start zooming down to like, okay, give me 5 things you need to do if you're going to solve that problem. And it might be transportation of food to sources, growing enough food. It might be preserving the food. And so now you get 5 key areas that you need to come down a level at, and it's more actionable. And then from there, you take one of those and you say, well, give me 5 things about this that I need to do to maybe say transport food. And you start talking about, well, I need gas stations positioned in a way, I need roads in place. And it's a way of zooming down to the point that if someone is going to work on this problem, you get to the point like, okay, I can begin to hire people to do this specific task. It's the same thing in gaming. If you start with the overall theme, I have a long night happening in Icewind Dale caused by a goddess who's trying to lock the region down. Now, give me 5 things that are happening and based on that. So you might tease this out, and it gets down to root. In business, it gets to root causes. In games, it gets to action, like actionable items. Like I can go stop the occult, or I can go uncover a plot line, or I can go kill a Yeti and get kidnapped people back. So it all is a way to get from these high level narrative elements down to, okay, I've got a session today. What do I give the players to do? What can they discover? What actions do I initiate? I have a question here from Mew V. I don't know why I can't say your name. Sorry about that. Wait a minute. What text editor are you using? This is Notion SO. You're going to find this everywhere. This is a very common text editor that's come out in the last year. Sublime Text I used quite a bit before this. I like Markdown a lot. This is not Markdown, but this is just a great sort of replacement for wikis. So in the next evolution of notepads and OneNote and all this stuff, a lot of people are moving to this. I find it super easy to use, super accessible. So it's just Notion.so. I don't own it. I don't own any stock in Notion.so, by the way. I'm just using the tools that work for me. This I find to be very, very useful for me, however. So I'm answering the question of what is lazy GM prep. So if you Google for Sly Flourish, I'll even do it. Sly Flourish, lazy DM prep. You'll find a great guide online to lazy DM prep. It'll give you things like what characters are in there, what names, and this is a little hard to read. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my actual notes that I use. And I show this every week. So if you join me every week, I'm sorry that this might be redundant, but it's always worth reinforcing this. And I've got so much nested content. I have it's under session notes. There we go. Session notes. So you can see we just did session 14. I'm not going to do session notes today. I'm going to do chapter notes, which is a little different than I typically do. And I wanted to give you that experience. But basically, just list out the players. I list out a quick who are they, where are they from. Then I added this. I list player traits. So if I notice their behavior during a campaign, I list out the things that I know, like this player loves obscure knowledge, artifacts, puzzles, art, role-playing quips. Might be a player like they like RP, dialogue, plot, chance to use ranger skills. Then this is a section I added. I list out the themes if there's a core theme tying everything together like in a module. So I list that: isolation, secrets, paranoia, blah, blah, blah. I list the plot threads that I have going. This is essentially my fronts document, which we'll get to today. This is the strong start. That's from Lazy DM Prep that just says start the session off with a bang that engages them right away. List out the potential scenes and what might be happening, and what secrets and information they can discover. An important part of this is you don't say how they'll discover it. You say this is what they could discover, and then you leave it up to the player's agency. I'm probably going to talk a lot about player agency today because it's been on my mind quite a bit this session. Players have way more agency than they think, and there's a whole bunch of artifacts built up in tabletop role-playing games that make, I think, a incorrect assumption about players and incorrect assumption about player agency. The first is that when players tell you something, that's what they actually want, or that when you need feedback, you just ask players and they tell you. Now, this is a hard topic to unpack because people are kind of dismissive about this, especially online. If you ask, how do I find out if my players like X, Y, or Z? Or how do I find out what they think about X, Y, or Z? The answer is always a flippant, just ask your players. And they automatically tell you what they need. And it's very dismissive of the real world. And I'll give you the evidence to why. I don't like to make claims without evidence. So here's my evidence. In the business world, soliciting feedback is so difficult and so obscure and such an arcane art that there are an entire industry, billion-dollar industry, built up around ferreting out actual feedback. That they realize that asking someone a question doesn't actually give you what they think. Not because the person's lying to you, not because they're malice or hiding something or anything, but because maybe they've thought about it for 30 seconds and they're describing some feeling that's not an actual result of what happened, or they're transferring an expectation or something else. But in business, we know that what people say does not map to their behavior. So you have to pull data from sales sources. You have to pull root words from what they say. There's a whole profession built up around uncovering what people actually think because they can't tell you what it is that they really think because they can't break it down like that efficiently. It's the same thing in tabletop games. Now, I want to be clear. You should absolutely ask your players for feedback. You should absolutely take that responsibility on to find out what they think, but don't take everything at face value. Look at what they do. If they say they like something and they do the opposite in game, I can't tell you what that means, but you should take a minute to think about that. And if they, no matter what they say, a lot of people no one's going to say, I don't like the role play, but all they do is combat. That's a strong indicator of where they spend their time is a de facto statement about their priorities. So I've been thinking a lot about this because we get a lot of like, I wish you had done X or I wish you had done Y. And when I think about it, do you really wish I had done that? It's difficult for a DM. Necrophindian. Necrophindian. I have a perceptual problem that makes it hard for me to read names, so I'm going to use that, beg off on that. It's not an excuse, but it's a reason. What players indicate they want in play is often very different from what they claim they want. If you ask them directly, that's exactly the truth, and it's a difficult spot for DMs to be in. And in a hobby where now I might be able to do that, but DMs come in all shapes and sizes. From they might lack experience in that thing. They might be young. D&D has to work from everyone from about 10 years old to 70 years old. You can't expect a 10-year-old to do a user study. That's ridiculous. And someone like me who does it, this is the irony of it. Don't expect me to do it either. I know it. I can do it. I have no desire to do this in my game because people have to pay me a lot of money in real life to do this because I hate it. I hate talking to people in this I have to assume they want something else. It's something that always, it just harshes me. So all of the things around like, how do I have to manage the players, things like that. The moment it starts feeling like work, I'm out. Now I'm willing to put effort into it. Effort is different from work. most people are willing to put effort into it, but it feels like work when you don't want to do it. This is something they should be doing and taking responsibility for, and they won't. And that's often a source of a lot of conflict at work. You feel like they should be taking responsibility for this, and they're not. And you just have to drag them into that meeting. You have to make them pay attention to this source. You have to pester them multiple times to get that backstory in or whatever else like that. And these are things that can make you feel like in a game, like, why am I doing this? And anyway, I'm going way off roading here, but that's player feedback, all that kind of stuff. There's a whole business there that that is sprung up. So you realize in gaming, while you absolutely should do it, while there is a tremendous amount of value in asking for feedback, don't overvalue the direct feedback you get. It's the process of asking feedback. It's the process of making those observations. And it's the process of iterating with those players on hearing what they say, trying something in game. Matter of fact, let me get to that. That's so it's that whole process is valuable. So here's what I think you should do. So I'm going to cap this off with some advice to you as a game master of over 40 years of what's the most effective way to try to translate that feedback into something actionable in your game. What you do is you hear what they say, you look at what they do, you make your best guess as to what do they seem to mean what they say. You can take that tactic, that's fine. Do you think it might be something else? That's also fine. If you create an yes, I can't say that word today. Iterative. You cycle through ways of Elmer Fudd it there. You'll cycle through ways to do small experiments with the assumption that you derive from talking to them and seeing if they react to it. That's the most effective way to go about it. Because this way, if there's small, quick experiments to try to find a confirmation that something is what either you think it is or what they said it is, then you can iterate through, I said the word. You can iterate through that experiment and then begin to incorporate more and more effective things into your game over time. But if they're not reacting to it, now you got a problem. Now you have but the idea to quickly move things, try things out, form a theory. It's a scientific method. You form a hypothesis, you come up with, well, this is how I would tell if this were true, and then you run that experiment in game and you go through. Necrophindian, effort is different from work. That's a keeper. Well said. Thank you very much. Yeah, effort is very, very different from work. I think that's what you have to... you definitely have to keep that in mind in gaming. Nobody minds putting effort into stuff that they enjoy, but when they don't enjoy it, that's the line between work and effort. So anyway, that player feedback should roll into some small experimentation to bring the game forward. So I was starting out, but what is lazy DM prep? This is what lazy DM prep says. So I answer things in a very roundabout kind of way. All right. So let me go up here to fronts. So fronts themselves and planning for... Oh, actually, let me close out where we were for the last campaign. A couple things happened on the blog this week I want to talk about. I'm going to talk about fronts in a second. I use that as a continuum of tools to come down from the very high level to the very low level. But let me talk about blog posts that I made. I think I'm editing this one still. Why did I edit this? Oh, I know why. I was trying to edit this because, as you might be able to see, this crazy... image does tile to the right exactly like I wanted it to, but if I go to the page, for some reason it does not go to the right, and it's annoying the crap out of me. Anyway, so if you were in last week's stream, I talked about a cavern trap elevator, an elevator trap. So it's this elevator that goes down into a dungeon, and I created this trap around it. This follows that Captivating Traps article that I posted a few weeks ago. It worked out well. This is an interesting thing. It really hit the players hard. When I say it worked out well from the GM's point of view, but the players were like, wow, they really felt punched in the gut when this hit them. And I'll tell you why. It was interesting. There's some interesting lessons here that I don't know the conclusion of, but I'm going to talk about the pieces of it. So quickly, what this is, I'm not assuming you join me. I wanted this to have, when I say captivating traps, to me, captivating traps are more environmental challenges than they are direct traps. In D&D, traditionally, you spring a trap, you take some damage, and then you move on. And they're boring because you've already taken the damage. You have no agency. It just moves on from there, and it doesn't really... It's like telling you something happened historically. It doesn't really matter. It's like a lore dump. But instead, so I want something to affect the environment and have a chain of events that are happening that the players can begin to try to manage with ideas and skills. So you set the next stage of what's happening and they begin to manage through it. So in this case, they go down this sort of mine shaft elevator. It's this a wooden framed elevator that descends 100 feet below. As they go down, when they get to the midpoint, if the trap has not been disarmed, it releases a boulder from the very top that falls down 40 feet, smashes the elevator, smashes through the elevator, and potentially sends the players falling to the bottom. So they get the series of actions are I describe something comes the elevator hits some kind of lever that makes the entire elevator jolt. The bolt, you hear something come loose from the cavern wall above you, and then the light is blocked out at the top of the tunnel. And I waited a beat, give the players a chance to say, I moved to the side. And one player did do that actually, which was interesting. So hypothesis, right? That was my hypothesis. One player caught on to it. They moved to the side and they I don't know what that little thing is up there. So I gave them advantage on the saving throw for the subsequent damage and the subsequent action. So the subsequent damage is boulder hits the elevator, smashes it apart. Everyone takes 4d6 damage. If they failed their dexterity save, they take half that if they succeed. Then the players need to make an athletic strength check or fall, which means they, for the player again who said they moved to the side, they get advantage of that. So the boulder is broken apart the elevator. They get an athletic strength check to hold on to the scaffolding to avoid falling the remaining 40 feet down to the bottom of the tunnel. As I predicted, as a matter of fact, it's weird because I predicted exactly half of the party would fail, and they did. Half of the party failed. So 2 members go plummeting down to the bottom of the shaft, take another 4d6 of damage. They are both unconscious. The remaining players 40 feet up, because the players below them are making death saves. Now they have to make athletics, strength, or dex saves to begin to climb down the scaffolding to get to them to stabilize them. So they have a choice. They can either choose to go down 15 feet safely and they don't have to make a roll at all, or they can make an athletic strength check. And if they make it, I think it was DC 15. If they make it, they can do their full movement speed, but they'll fall themselves. So they had to weigh that risk, and it actually worked out pretty tense. I liked it. The chapter worked out very well. It's posted on my blog. Go ahead and use it. Give me some comment on it. I thought it was pretty interesting. But this is an example of how I like traps to be a chain of events that engages a number of skills, planning, agency, and things like that. I'm trying to train the players, by the way, to be a little bit more proactive. I'm having a hard time with that. It's a bit of they like to say things after the fact. They're not much with the proactive planning, which isn't an indictment, by the way. It's just that's the nature of the group. But I'm trying to liven things up. So here we are. Now, the irony of this whole thing is that I intended for them to have a fight at the top of the tunnel. By the way, I used this to replace another fight because it's a scenario in Rime of the Frostmaiden called Black Swords, and they go through several fights with several people in different rooms of this keep that they're invading, and I didn't want like a 5th fight with a room. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to wipe all that out. I'm going to wipe out half of those fights. I'm going to put a single trap in to replace it to change the pace up a little bit and give them something. What I expected them to do is have a fight at the top of the shaft and then go down, have a chance to look for traps and go down the elevator. Someone came out for a side room, however, that in the player's mind was a boss fight. And it's interesting, this is video game thinking. It wasn't, though. That's what the ironic part of this whole thing was. The character, because they had a description, because they had an image, the players automatically thought that this is a boss. So they thought, I'm going to escape from this fight and avoid the boss fight by jumping down the elevator shaft. So they jumped in, grabbed the rope, did all these athletics check, and then slid down the rope quickly while the elevator was coming up, and then turned it in reverse and headed back down. That was great. However, the elevator was way worse than that fight with that NPC because it really wasn't a boss. He was the leader of the group, but it wasn't a boss fight. And so they blindly threw themselves into a danger that was way worse than the danger that they were escaping. And I actually say that there's nothing I would do different. That's the game. That's the emergent nature of the game. It's the DM's role to set up scenarios and situations and let the players make their choices. It's not your role to say, "Hey guys, this is more dangerous," or that's like, you should feed them the information they would have, but you let them make their choices and live with it. So I thought that was interesting. It was a really interesting way it worked out. I think the players were really frustrated because you can see, like, one of them was like, my character sits up against the wall, and they were honestly, my read on them, I don't know what they felt, but my read on them was one or two of them pouted a little bit about it. And I think it's because in their mind, they thought they were being super clever and escaping the boss, when in reality, they were jumping into the mouth of this trap instead. And that harshed their mellow. Again, I wouldn't change it, but it was like, oh, I didn't want the players to feel that, but you just got to roll with it. You got to roll with the scenarios. And by the way, I'm using my Tachi mug today. The Expanse had its last episode, its final episode for this season on Wednesday. Great show. Catch it. I love it. All nerd culture things. Thank you, Derry Dice Roller, for saying you like that trap a lot. Yeah, and I'll post more traps like this. They take longer to write, but I do things like this all the time. If you've ever played Lost Mines of Phandalin, one of my favorite things to do is one of the early encounters with that is after the goblin ambush, you head up this trail and you're heading to the goblins' headquarters, basically the little base camp. And there's in the middle of nowhere, there's this loop trap that grabs somebody by the ankle and hangs them upside down in the forest. And it's annoying. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't really do much damage. It's really annoying and there for no reason. So instead, I move that up to the entrance to the cavern. So when the players are sneaking. Oops, I'm gonna belch. When the players are sneaking up to the goblin camp, that might grab them as they exit the woods. And so now that fight starts. If the players aren't careful, that fight starts with one of them hanging in the air as the goblins shoot arrows at them. That's way more exciting. But it does put the players on notice that, yeah, stuff's gonna get real. Yeah. Anyway, so that's a trap I posted there. I'll post more examples of stuff like this in the future. Again, the idea is to engage multiple skills and create a way for players to reason through it. If you follow me on Twitter, you probably noticed a little irascible comments with somebody about skill challenges from 4th edition. I'm not going to unpack that whole thing, but I'll say this. The idea of skill challenges is great, whether you like the mechanic from 4th edition or not. The idea that skill challenges create a progressive set of failures and successes, build towards or away from something, that's what we're trying to get to in D&D. The other blog post, I think I might have posted it last week, but the safety and consent checklist. I hope you'll check this out before a game. I added a couple of resources to it, including a link to my campaign pitch deck and my safety checklist form. You can use those for your game. These are for my last campaign, so you'll need to adapt them, but just clone these. These are in Google Drive, and I'm not going to go down this. I'll do a session on these sometime, but these give you sort of a base pitch and then a form you can use to sort of talk about what rating people are comfortable with, what kind of elements and things like that. But it's a tool I think you can use. And I linked out to Consent in Gaming, the Tabletop Safety Role-Playing Toolkit, X-Card System, blah, blah, blah. I think this is useful for you. I want you to know that this was up on the blog. Okay. We're halfway through the show and I haven't even begun the topic yet. How's everybody doing today? All right. So I would love to... So let's talk about fronts and planning. So again, where are the characters? The flow of Rime of the Frostmaiden is that the players start in this 10-town area. Let me go to Foundry. I use Foundry VTT, by the way. This is the last fight that they had last time. Let me go to Icewind Dale map. Let me clear all of this. Get rid of that. So Icewind Dale map. The core civilized area of Icewind Dale is this central period of the map where you see these dots. This is something called the 10 Towns. And Chapter 1 of Icewind Dale is entirely focused on the 10 Towns region. This sort of personal exchange, that Tier 1 play where things are one-on-one engagements or person-to-person. Now they've hit 4th level. They're about to move up to sort of that Tier 2 play. They're not quite there yet, but they're right at the end of it. What I'll talk about in a second, which I think is actually well done in this module. But Tier 2 basically means now they're getting to regional-wide threats. So they're going to start talking about the interaction of tribes and peoples in the region, greater area threats, and things like that. What I think this module does well is they're choosing to have the players begin Tier 2 play at level 4, at the end of Tier 1. I actually like that because this going right into tier 2 play in tier 2 doesn't make you feel that sense of growth. But starting it just out of reach, this is a lot of the theme of this module. Things are so hard that it's almost out of reach or just out of reach. That's a central theme to this module, and I like that design because if you start them at tier 2 play at 4th level, just shy of it, they're going to feel that sense of, oh my God, this is so hard. So when it becomes less and less hard as they progress through that, they're going to feel, oh, you know what? We're getting better. This is actually something we're getting better at. I did that earlier in some things I threw at. That's why I created this sort of boundary of my own chapter 1 and chapter 2. The players had gone through my chapter 1 was dealing with this plot line called Cold-Hearted Killer. I'm not going to get into it, but basically it was they were chasing a caravan that was trying to recover magical items to ingratiate them to the Frostmaiden. Along the way, they discovered a couple of adventures, and it capped out to get to 2nd to 3rd level with a fight with these people. So prior, first and 2nd level, every fight was with a death slog. They had to worry about hit points and all of this stuff for every fight they were in. Now, when they went to 3rd level, the first encounter I had them make as they come out of their patron's locations, they run across some bandits they were hired as actually the backstory is not important. They ran across some bandits divvying up some loot at the side of the road, decided to ambush them, and these players ripped through them. And I purposefully used some stat blocks, some bandit stat blocks that I had used earlier that they had problems with, that now they just tore through them like tissue paper. And the players even said, wow, we've really come a long way. That's exactly, and it was this game master moment where I was like, ha, I've scored. So it really gave me that feeling like I'm telling the story, that I'm giving the players the story I want them to receive. That's great. Then we went into wider area play. So the level 3 play was now they're worrying about, instead of individual people in the town, they're affecting plots in the town itself. So this is that boundary kind of between tier 1 and tier 2. That's why it was a 2nd chapter for me. So then they went on this plot line of there's this magical storm region, which you can find on my blog. I created this, it might be here somewhere. Sorry, captivating traps. I write too much content too quickly. Yeah, it's in here somewhere. But anyway, a magical region I created for Rime and the Frostmaiden that creates these magical effects. I used that to justify the sacrifices the towns are making. What I wanted them to do at the end of chapter 2 was feel like, okay, I've come into the 10 towns and they are in complete disarray. I've got them stable enough. They're still barely getting by, but I've got them stable enough that I can begin to look out in the greater regions. Because if you make things too hard for players, they'll do what's called turtling, which means like if you give them a home and you constantly have the home attacked, or you give them some resource, some NPC follower or something in that, and you're always endangering that NPC, they're going to turtle up, which means they're going to stay at that house just in case it gets attacked. They're going to focus too much on defensive play and not enough on offensive play, which means going out there and being proactive. So I wanted to get them to a place where they felt like, okay, I've got the 10 towns settled. The last bit of threats have been removed. I can begin to look at like what's going on regionally here and get into those plots. And that's where they are. Now, I tried a technique here that's worth talking about this week, and I'd love to hear your experience with it if you've ever done it. I used a off-screen cutaway technique. I don't often use it, and I'm even on the fence about whether I regret using it or not. But basically, the players, I like this domino effect that I had set up. The bad guys were this political intrigue plot that I had added called the Chartland Syndicate. But political campaigns, unless the players themselves are heavily into plotting, they're dry for most games, because what are you going to do? I don't think these players realize that about themselves, and that was disappointing. But like anyway, it's a plot line where this subversive thieves guild kind of thing called the Chartland Syndicate was attempting to take over politically the 10 towns. So the culmination of chapter 4 was a cutaway back to the Speakers Council that was meeting in a different town than the players were at. The players were stopping the main support mechanism for that conspiracy. So when they went to take over the councilship, all this supply line that they were going to set up to feed the people, to get the people on their side, didn't happen. The people turned on them. They had to run, and I described it in a montage. I think it was sort of a grab bag of good and bad. One, I think the players will ultimately, in the long run, appreciate that because they didn't want another 2 sessions of hanging around the 10 towns. We've been here since September. Literally, I started this campaign middle of September. It's February. I think they're ready for a different plot. I don't think they realize that, but I think they're ready for something different. So this is my way to move on from them. And I didn't want to leave these thread lines hanging out there loosely for them to come back to, because one, the player, every time I give them slack time, players don't use it. My players do not use it. That goes back to that feedback thing. Players talk all the time about, oh, I wish I had time to do X. I wish I had time to do Y. These players are no different. Because all players do that. It's not their fault. But every time I've gone to, hey, we can blow through 2 weeks if you want. Let's do something. What do you want to do? Nothing. I had one player once decide to take 20 days to craft a magic item, and then a couple other players look around. But there was no like role-playing thread that they were looking to follow up on. There was no conversation they went to do. So again, it's that I have in one hand what the players are telling me, and I have in the other hand what they're actually doing, and they don't match up. And maybe that's a failure on the DM's part, but honestly, I don't care. It's like at the point where you the player are responsible to do something. I'm not managing you like work. You have to take these opportunities to do something with it, and if you choose not to, that's on you, baby. So yeah, that might be a little bit of flippant, but that's where I'm at with it. So back to fronts and writing fronts. I'm going to close that out next. So I don't want players turtling. I want them to be able to look externally and feel free to pursue those plot lines. Now, let's talk about how do I come up with those plot lines. So first, I look at the source material itself. When I'm running, if I'm running a not module, if I'm running my own homebrew campaign, which I actually typically do, I come up with what do I want to have happen, what's interesting, and I go from there. But in here, there's a whole chapter 2. Rime of the Frostmaiden is constructed very much like Dragon of Icespire Peak, where all of these individual locations have their own adventure and they're kind of separate. I've gone back and made a through line of plot through them, and I'll do that for chapter 2. That's what this front thing is going to be. But the module itself is intended to be separate. Necrophindian, though. Use cutaways extensively. Call them segues. Yeah, that's a better term. For many years, I've scaled back on the technique a lot lately. I'd be interested to hear, like, what did you cut back because you lost interest in them? Do you feel like they weren't doing what you wanted them to do? Did you feel like did you replace it with a different technique? Ooh, that'd be interesting to hear your feedback. But let me know in the chat if you have a moment to check. I know it'll take you a minute to type out, but I'll return to it if you reply, because I would love to hear your feedback there, and any recommendations you have for anyone watching this stream on what they can do in their game. So I have a bunch of individual encounters. Now, just like chapter 1, the way this is arranged is you're going to use about. I'm going to sneeze. I might sneeze in a second. Oh, sorry about that, everybody. I should have hit the sneeze button. Sorry, it's dusting my office today. You're going to use the way this is a milestone-based module, so you end up using. I think they set it out where you complete 2 of these adventures, you go to 1 level, you complete 2, you go to another level, blah blah blah. So, given that pace, you end up using about half of the content in chapter 1, and it's going to be the same in chapter 2. I'm only going to use about half of this content now. I've teased plot lines before, and I have a couple I know I'm going to use. Some of them are retrofitted, and I'll actually tell you which one. This, I don't know how to pronounce it, Enjutuk's Bell or something like that. And this is, what you have in this, I'm going to find the artwork. The players run across this awakened sperm whale with a boat thing tied to their front and a little air bubble, and it can take them underwater. I haven't read this fully. I don't care what this is. I'm using this because holy crap, a sperm whale they can ride underwater with an air bubble. How awesome is that? So I don't care what else happens in this next chapter. I am using this encounter. The rest are just, some of them are really great. Cackling Chasms is a great knoll, like vampire knolls held up in these caves. Id Ascending, that's a crashed mind flayer ship, which I've already teased as a plot line here. So, and Jarlmoot, those are probably the ones I'm going to definitely use. And as you can see, there's a lot here. Sky Tower Shelter, boy, this is just a lot here. So I'm probably going to use them. So when I go to my fronts, what I do is, let me go to Notion SO. Fronts differentiate from lazy DM prep. Again, check out lazy DM prep. In that, it's really this plot thread section that I've added. I add it from my fronts document. Now, this isn't, I'm actually going to copy this in because I'm going to use some of it because a lot of these have been resolved, but I'm going to copy these in. So let's go over to fronts. Rime the Frostmaiden, where are we at? Where you at, baby? Campaign notes and idea. Chapter, scenario list, chapter 3 plot lines and fronts. I've only just barely started this. So I have got from my previous stuff, this Charlton Syndicate plot, satisfied, I can get rid of that. Yeah, and you can see the plot was just Charlton Syndicate is conspiring with Duergar, Zauderock Sunblight, to take over the 10 towns. That was resolved completely. I can get rid of it. Although the Duergar threat, you can see is still here. I didn't mean to get rid of everything. The Duergar threat, you can see is still here. That's actually, I'm debating. This is what I'm doing here. I'm debating, is this still active or not? Is it worth going down the path of, because the players don't seem to really care. Again, I have a hard time with this because the players are passive. They seem to sort of want me to throw things at them and then tell me after the fact whether they like them or not. I'm really struggling with that. Oriel's Realm of Winter, that's still active. That's Oriel's Long Night. I'll delete the duplicate here. So what you do with threats is you give the basic setup and then you give 3 progressions of how this is going to progress if the players do nothing. So that lets you inform and look for opportunities to include this in this chapter you're going into. So what is going on? This Mind Flayer technology, this is my plot, by the way. The reason why I've added this plot is because I'm cutting the last chapter of this module. It's just the climax of the module should be fighting the goddess Oriel. I don't know why there's a chapter after that. It makes absolute no sense to me. The climax of this module is defeating a goddess. I don't understand it why it wouldn't be. So the original Arcane Brotherhood plotline I'm taking out here and I'm putting in a different one, which means which is instead that they're trying to where are we at? They're broken Arcane Brotherhood. They're looking for a means to make Cytolin, which is something I had crystals to draw power on. So let me put that up here. So that's it. This is the baseline. That's what they're doing. So progression. They will begin more. So what that is, Cytolin is, there's a Crash Mind Flayer ship out there. It is sending as a module, but all of this plot is my ad. Basically, they've discovered that Mind Flayers can torture people and draw their power and bind it to these crystals called Cytolin that I made up. The advantage is those things can do things like cast above level or maintain concentration on spells. So it's not like a magic item that allows you to cast a spell yourself. The magic item itself is semi-conscious and casting it themselves. And it's an easy, cheap way to make magic items as long as you don't mind torturing people. So they're pretty bad that way. So players, I think, although they're only quasi interested in this, I can't gauge their interest. I assume the plot potential here is that they stop the Arcane Brotherhood from getting this technology and destroy it, or they gather it for themselves. I guess if they want to be evil, that might be something they do. So what would happen here? I'm trying to give myself 3 plot lines that would happen as this progresses and gets worse. So what's the ultimate threat? This is why I'm on the fence about this plot line, because the ultimate thing is they get what they want and they just leave the region. There's no reason for them to stay here. So, but the progression is more of these items and effects begin to appear in the region. So I'll be looking as I work through this module. So I'll be looking for opportunities to express that to players. They might go to Jarlmoot, which is a Storm Giant clan, and in the midst of that, maybe they formed an alliance with one of the Arcane Brotherhood. Because my next set of chapters, I envision, and again, this is a hard one because the players are kind of passive, so it's hard to say. I'm envisioning that the Orreal, this undoing this long winter that Orreal has gotten into. The sorry, I'll answer your question in a second. This long winter, that's the climax of the entire module. So I've got 2 chapters I'm creating between here and there. The next chapter, chapter 3, is about undoing the plot lines of the Arcane Brotherhood who are trying to take advantage of the situation here and gain power. That's what I think the next plot line is. And then after that, it's getting enough power, like, oh, we've got enough information and power. So the inputs and outputs of this are Arcane Brotherhood has gathered some information. The players, in defeating them, will acquire that information that tells them how to undo what Orreal is doing. So the feed in here is that the players will go. That's the transition from that chapter to the next. I don't know how I'm going to pull that off, but just saying that, I know I have an input and I have an output. I need something in this plot line, in this fronts, to tell me how they're going to get from X to Z. All right, so I have a couple of questions here. The big reasons for scaling back. This is on the Necrophindian, for the cutaways, scaling back on cutaways. Their big reason for cutting back, it gets to be a pain remembering what OC information and what's IC information. Absolutely true, especially in long-running campaigns. I now look for ways to effectively deliver the sequence via an in-character source, which is usually the NPC relating a story, dream omens, blah, blah, blah. That's great. And actually, I'll tell you, that's why I tried this off-screen thing. I had been doing that, and I might go back to that, but I've been doing that previously where an NPC will tell them what's going on. So I'll let them. You can't unpack history always with an in-game action. Sometimes the NPCs tell you information, and the players were feeling very lore dumped. Now, I'm on the fence about this because I think this is an artifact of online play. If you take a minute or two to do something online, that feels like a long time. So the players feel like, oh my God, a lore dump, and they start complaining about it. But if they see it, if I give them the action and tell them something's happening, they're browsing web browsers, they're doing other things, they're barely paying attention. I have another player who literally like, what was that a couple minutes ago? And so they're not paying attention. I'm not arriving. This is really their problem. They need to pay attention, but they're not. So I either have to say I'm canceling the game, or I'm trying to find out some other way to do it. So I'm enjoying the game, so I'm not going to cancel it. So I'm trying out other things. So I tried out this montage thing today, and hey Hope, how are you? It's great to have you here. So yeah, I don't know. Anyway, that's my latest experiment. I don't have a clear result of it, but that's why I was trying it. But yeah, that I'm trying to find some happy medium between lore dump, moving the plot forward, and outcome and results. The other thing I'll say that the off-screen thing does for me as a game master, I don't want the players turtling, so I don't want them to feel like if they're not personally there, the world can't resolve itself. So I wanted that sense of, I can never say the word verisimilitude or whatever the word is, to make it feel like a living, breathing world, one. And two, I don't want them to feel like everybody in the world is incompetent but them, and they have to be there for everything. So there's a method to my madness here. And then Mew Mew V was asking, explain fronts a bit. Yeah, so what fronts are basically setting out a high level plot line that's going to be happening over this sort of a section of a campaign. It can be the entire campaign or a section of the campaign. Here I call sections of chapters. So this is going to be several months. Like, this is what we're building towards. It's something happening in the background that the players need to discover. They'll experience along the way, and will either progress or degrade based on the players' interactions with it. That's essentially what a front is. So that's a way to plan your session-to-session games, because it's wrapped around the fronts and what's happening in the background. But that's essentially what it is. So that's what I'm doing here. So I have the fronts here are the basic strategic things are the Arcane Brotherhood in Icewind Dale is searching for Mind Flayer technology, and IE looking for, that's what this first bullet is here. Let me go up here. IE looking for the means to make Cytolin crystals to draw power on. So that's the Arcane Brotherhood is here, trying to uncover a Crash Mind Flayer ship that has this easy way to make evil magic items, kind of. So that's a plot line I teased in chapter 2 and 3. So that's something. Why? So now I have to give some progression to that plot line that the players can begin to see as they engage these adventures. So I'll just give myself three. Give yourself three progressive ways. So the first is more of these items and effects begin to appear in the region. So that's kind of weak, but basically frost giants are bribed with magical help making them a greater threat. So what I want is when I increase political danger in the world, what I generally do is there's something driving behind the political danger. So instead of making it a political game, unless the players show me they're all interested in political role playing, in which case I'll do the actual mechanism. So when the players aren't, instead what I try to do is these political entities have things supporting them. I think of it like a game of diplomacy. You have the plot at the top and you have things below it supporting it. Once you take the things below it, the thing at the top away, the thing at the top collapses. So that's how I do political plots for non-political players. So here, if the threats are like the Arcane Brotherhood are cutting deals with people to give them access. Actually, I just need to write that. The Arcane Brotherhood is cutting deals with people in the region to give them access to exploring regions, recover prisoners like Mind Flayer prisoners, or recover technology, and they're trading with them and giving them power. And so that's it. So they'll, AB are cutting deals. That's the first thing they'll discover with power structures, power players in the region to gain access to explore, recover items, and what else? And are supporting basically are giving bad support to the region. So yeah. So a political ally in the Frost Giants might get some support from an 8th level mage. That's actually quite a bit of support, right? And they've recovered these Mind Flayer artifacts have fallen into their effects. So the players will begin to uncover clues about this. So another question of would you maintain 2 character sheets? I'm not really sure. Just curious, how would I have it set up so that like I use online tabletop, but I like have my own character sheet stored in a file on my computer? Yeah, I don't know how to answer that. That's a little bit more of how do you manage your physical stuff. Multiple windows is the way to go. That's what I would say. Would I have to maintain 2 character sheets, or how exactly would I keep them lined up? I really don't know how to answer that question. Basically, 2 different files is the way to go. If you're on D&D Beyond, use 2 different characters. Mew V again. Oh, so wait, what is political role playing like? Political role playing is more interaction, is more persuasion oriented, and it's about understanding the social structures of regions so that you're affecting them. So instead of taking out like guards and things like that, you're trying to set up power players and you understand the influence that people have on each other, and you have a very subtle understanding, and your character does too, of interpolitics, that you and the game master view the world working the same way. There's a lot there to unpack, but certainly you can do that. But players, I will say that, again, this group is not different from a lot of groups. A lot of players will say they like politics, but politics is a long game. It's a chess game. You have to put pieces into place. You have to arrange things, be proactive about how that structure would work, make assertions about how you're structuring your political allies before you make your political move. It's very intricate. It's very slow, and it's a build-up. But these players, like a lot of players, and people do this in D&D all the time, especially in D&D, they come in and say, well, I said something, so something should happen, right? And they have that expectation that, well, I've said something and I've rolled the skill, so the world should shift, right? And that's a bad fit for political role playing. It's not really anything. You wouldn't say, well, I went in and I rolled combat, so I won, right? You need to turn social actions into an almost combat structure where you progress incrementally through something towards or away from something. That's political role playing. Sorry. So I'm back to this front section here. And actually we burned through a ton of time. So I need 3 elements of what they're going to do. So I want this to climax something. Oh, I know what I'm going to do. So the Arcane Brotherhood are cutting deals with power players in the region. So at first they're gaining power. So I think the plot here is them gaining or losing power. So the Arcane Brotherhood are creating alliances. The players can follow them up and undo those alliances over time. The Arcane Brotherhood can free a colleague who is in prison to gain knowledge of the location of the Mind Flayer ship. This is it. Flayer, because they have to find the location of this crashed Mind Flayer ship to recover the artifacts to be able to make these items. And then the last one is the Arcane Brotherhood recovers the items at the crashed ship. At the crash Mind Flayer ship. Yeah, and then abandon the region and go off and do evil in the world. Then abandon region and go off and do evil in the world. So what will happen is just at the conclusion of the campaign, it'll be like that Fallout montage where I'm telling the players, items have begun to appear in the world and people have begun to disappear. The Arcane Brotherhood has gained strength, and all of their political, they've begun to appoint themselves to positions of power in the Sword Coast or something like that. So that's essentially what a front is. What are the actions these bad guys are doing? I know these are spelled wrong, by the way. And how does it progress over time? I know the second bullet of, they're going, finding and recovering items, creating alliances with like the Frost Giants or the other, the Nomad tribes or something like that. The players are following up after them, undoing their power base and their alliances. Now, whether that's successful or a failure, eventually they're going to realize one of their members have discovered the location of this crashed ship. The players need to get to that person before the Arcane Brotherhood does, or just wipe them out before they're able to get to the ship. And one way or another, then the next stage of this is the players will either have found the location of the Mind Flayer ship and choose to go there themselves, in which case the Arcane Brotherhood will follow them, or the Arcane Brotherhood finds out first and goes first, and the players need to intercept him. That's the plot line. That's chapter 3. So now that's the overall way, but I'm going to find all of these adventures. I'm going to seed in the elements of this into these chapter items. Like I know Cackling Chasm will probably be some vampire ghoul that has recovered turned one of the Mind Flayers into a vampire, let's say one of the gnome vampires, and they've gotten some information from them in that. There's a plot line here. One of these is, I think it's Sky Tower Shelter. But anyway, there's a prison scenario. No, that's not it. There's a prison scenario where an Arcane Brotherhood member is in a prison. That's really cool. It's on a mountainside. You can only reach it by a boat, and the players have to go there and uncover a mystery. So I'll say but there's no real reason why you're going there. So I'll say that's the reason. The Arcane Brotherhood is trying to find out information from them. And I'll just do, the rest of this stuff will be just following in the footsteps of the Arcane Brotherhood. Now, I'll do that out of stream for all of these other things. For instance, I have a Duragar plot that I might drop, actually. I mean, the players are just kind of meh about the whole thing. And that is that the Duragar have been trying to subvert the 10 towns to continue on with their war with Mithril Hall. That's another plot. I've cut this plot of the Chartland Dragon by the Duragar because I just ran a dragon encounter in my last campaign. I don't want to do it again. And then the sort of last big thing is Orwell's Reign of Winter. I have a couple questions here. I'm going to wrap up the stream with this. Macrophidian. I'm sorry, man. I can't pronounce your name. Suggestions. You have Mind Flayer stuff, and you have Duragar. Shouldn't there really be some sort of intersection here? Maybe Arcane Brotherhood and Duragar get into it with one another, causing an issue for everyone. Yeah, that's a good suggestion, and that's kind of how I'm leaning. The Duragar themselves would want to recover those artifacts, so you have two competing factions. I'll tell you why I'm on the fence about it. The players, their ability to or their desire to absorb plot lines, at least I don't observe as high. In my chapters 1 and 2, I had competing faction. I had the Chartland Brotherhood, I had the Arcane Brotherhood out there, and I had the Duragar out there. And I think, to be honest, I just confused them. I think they were like, how does this interrelate? In my mind, I thought it was setting up a very fragile system of alliances that the players could pick the one they wanted to go after and undo. Instead, the players kind of like, I don't know what that is, and they sort of didn't follow up. So honestly, I'm hesitant to do that. I'm thinking, do I do it like get rid of this intricate interwoven plot lines? Because I love that idea as a DM, but either it's online play or my failure as a DM or their failure as players to pay attention, or it's a platform. I don't know, or it's all of them working together to make that a little bit. But I also know myself, and I'm probably going to do that anyway. I always say I'm not going to, but I'm going to do it. But at least if I start from a place of economy, I'll keep it down. So I think you're right. I'm actually probably going to do that. Yeah, it's breaking my heart too. It might have to be never to be one of your plays. It's breaking my heart too, because I would love for there to be, be more to it. But I don't know. That my experience with 5th edition, and I can't tell if it's people. What I do when I play, I generally play with people in my hometown, even though I'm playing online right now. We're all in the midst of a pandemic. I had a face-to-face game. I had but I'm still playing with people in my hometown because I'm hoping to start up face-to-face games again once the pandemic passes. I prefer them, and but I don't know. They're all from this local club, and they tend to be very sort of more lighthearted in their play, which again, not a bad thing at all. It's fine. They're great people. It's just that's the style and genre of their play that they get to, and I tend to like more involved political play. And that's nothing wrong with that either. It's just a mismatch of expectations. So I can't figure out if it's just 5th edition has skewed more towards like an assumed anime genre, whereas I'm older, so I'm still stuck in that sword and sorcery mindset, or it's just something else, or it's just a local personality thing, or it's a personality of this club and there's other people local. Honest to God, I can't tell. But again, it's not bad. It's just where people's tastes are. They're great players. I love the game. I'm just trying to find something. I'm always trying to look for a way to make it more effective, and I'm probably being a little bit too hard on myself. But that's where it is. Yeah, same as it comes to face-to-face games. Yeah, I just like face-to-face a lot more. I intend to do online one-shots with people not in the town, so look for that this coming year. I keep saying that, but I haven't pulled the trigger on it yet. But I've got a couple of great one-shots that I put out there. That, of course, I would think they're great because I put them out there. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. You can't get into political play really in one shot, so there's a downside there. All right. We're at the top of the hour. So what fronts are? Fronts are basically a nice strategic vision of what this plot line could be. 3 progressive elements of how that plot line is going to progress amongst a series of encounters and adventures that you're going to lay out in front of the players, and you work to integrate those into the encounters and find those opportunities. So in future streams, I'm going to be looking back at this document. I'll finish this before next stream. I'll be looking back at this document when I'm doing my session planning and thinking, I'm sending them off in this location. How could I integrate one of these fronts into that adventure coming out? That's how I do it. So that's how you look for these opportunities. You don't prescribe things. You don't say it has to happen this way. You look for an opportunity to do it, and the players either take it up or they don't, or something else happens, and the whole thing just moves on. All right. I am going to wrap it up here today. Thank you so very much for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this stream, I hope you'll give me a follow. I hope you do all the social media things, like, subscribe, follow. I really hope you'll share some of these things on social media. I'm a super small channel. I've only been doing this since September. I am looking to grow, but I don't have any aspirations of being a big influencer or anything like that. I would just love, when I say grow, what I mean is I would love to have people like yourself in today, people who give good input. They're sharing their experiences, their thoughtful ideas, sharing their failures with one another. That this stream is oriented towards getting games run. Don't overthink it. Just go out and run a game. Just go out and feel empowered to do what you think is fun. Find that group that your voice speaks to and do that thing that you think would be fun to do. And you will find the right players to do it. And just look at the tools you have in front of you. Think of all of these things as tools, not tasks. These are tools. You look at a situation, you think, how do I do it? And then you go, well, I heard somebody use this method to do that. Let me use that as a way to sort of channel my thinking into something. And pick the right tool for the right situation. Sometimes you'll make a good choice. Sometimes you'll make a bad choice. Sometimes you won't be able to tell, which I did a lot of that today. So that's my advice. Anyway, give a like, subscribe, thumbs up. Share it, please, on your social media. I would really love it. Tag me on Twitter. I'm there very actively. Share it on Reddit. They don't like self-promotion, but if other people promote you, that's really great. So if you find something on my blog or on these videos, please go ahead and share it. All of those things, super, super helpful. Follow me on Instagram. Follow me on Twitter. I'm mostly available on Twitter. If I follow somebody on Twitter, go ahead and follow them. They're great. I really try to curate that list really good. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed talking to you. Join me next week. I stream every week at noon on Saturdays. I think I've only missed 1 week in the last couple months. So go ahead and join me next week. We'll see how this whole thing progresses. I hope your game goes fantastic. I hope you run some of this. Drop me a note if you've used any of this in your games in an effective way. I hope you'll find something useful here. Remember, until next time, fun is not optional. All right. Thanks, everybody. You take care. Have a good week.
Thank you.